Hello, welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make soft pretzels with an active dry yeast. And this recipe is a quick pretzel method or quick making pretzel method. Some other recipes you might find online, they might take a little bit more time. Just as a reminder, yeast takes a little bit more time because you have to activate it. You have to let it come alive. Typically, we'll let the dough rise. For this recipe, we're going to do a shortcut method, and I'll explain that as I go. All right, so first off, let's look at the recipe. So we are making soft pretzels. This is not an Antienne recipe, but it is similar. It's very tasty. This is just basic, so it does just have salt on the top. You can do cinnamon sugar, you can do pizza, you can do pepperoni, you could do cheese, whatever you want. But essentially what you're going to be using is warm water. You're going to be using active dry or instant yeast, some salt, granulated sugar, 3 to 3/4 cup of flour, all the way up to 4 cups of flour. We'll talk about that. An egg, which is going to take on a different role in this recipe. And then we have that salt for the topping. Again, you can change that to whatever you want. So the directions, it's really important if you do plan to make this that you read through the directions thoroughly. I will be obviously explaining it to you. So it's obviously much easier to see if you can read it and then see someone actually make it. All right. So that's where we stand. Let's get started on our pretzels. So let me just stop sharing my screen. All right. So here I have everything pre-measured. So the first thing we're going to do is I have right here 1.5 cups of warm water. So when you activate yeast, the water needs to be lukewarm and then it will activate quickly. Okay. And when you activate yeast, the step is called proofing or fermenting prior to actually adding it to flour. Now, this is a really good method for making sure your yeast is working before you actually put it with flour. Sometimes the recipe just has you, add it all, and then it's like cross your fingers and hope it works. This method will guarantee that your yeast is working, so your bread will rise. All right, so here we go. So 1.5 cups of lukewarm water, 110 to 120 degrees. You should touch it. It just feels like bath water. And then I have 2¼ teaspoons of active dry yeast. So this is our active dry yeast. You can also use instant. They do sell packets at the grocery store. Usually it comes 3 packets all combined. You can use 1 packet, which is equal to 2¼ teaspoons. All right, so I added that. Then we're going to add a tablespoon of sugar. So sugar is our food for the yeast. And then we have salt. Okay, so salt, just like most recipes, it controls the growth. It's a growth inhibitor, so it just controls it. So we just need a teaspoon. All right, and then you're going to take a fork and we're going to let this activate. Okay, you want to dissolve as much of the sugar, salt, and the yeast in this mixture as possible. And then we wait for activation. All right, I'll show you. You can kind of see it's starting to take action already because the environment that we are putting the yeast in is an environment that it's going to thrive. Warm water. We gave it some food, sugar, and we gave it some salt to control the growth. So now we're just going to set this off to the side and let it do its thing. All right. So in the meantime, I have my flour. All right. So the recipe calls for 3 cups and 3/4 to 4 cups of flour. So what I did was I put 3 cups of flour in one bowl, and then I have a cup of flour in the other bowl. The reason why I did that is because I might not use all this flour. Depending on how the flour reacts, I might not use it all. All right. So you don't always just want to assume when it gives a range that you're going to be using all the flour. So I'm going to take my 3 cups of flour. I'm going to put it right into my bowl. And then I'm still waiting for my yeast to activate. Here's a little status update. You can kind of see it's becoming very foamy. It's growing. That means that my conditions for this yeast are great and it's just thriving. All right. In the meantime, Okay. I'm going to keep this extra yeast right by because I might need it. And then I'm going to get my egg ready. So the egg is what is going to be used as what's called an egg wash. So when the dough is done and we're prepping it for baking, prepping these pretzels for baking, shaping them and whatnot, you want to put breads, get an egg wash. So that helps. Doesn't give any flavor, but it helps give a golden brown color. All right. So our egg is ready. All right. So we are good to go here. So you can do this with a kitchen mixer, but we're going to do this by hand just so you can see everything. I am going to remove my rings just because I am going to be touching the dough with my hands, and I'm going to do something called kneading. Okay. Kneading is a form of working your dough. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine our activated yeast with our flour. Okay. So let's do that now. So this is all activated. All right. Waited a couple minutes and it's good to go. So I know my yeast is working, and I'm just going to pour all of that right in, into my flour mixture. Don't drop it like I did. Oops. All right. And I'm just using a rubber scraper to make sure I get every last morsel of sugar and yeast out of my container here. All right. And then I'm going to mix this, and I'm essentially going to be forming a dough. So when you make yeast, they follow, and if you take pastry chef, you learn more details about making yeast. So there's 10 stages of yeast bread production. Okay, the first one is to measure all of your ingredients, and it's actually called scale your ingredients. And what that means is you would use a kitchen scale to measure it if you were actually working in a bakery. Okay, after that's step one. So scale your ingredients, measure. Okay, step two is to mix and knead to make a dough. Okay, so I have combined my flour. All right. And this is actually, so you see, I already have like a dough, and this is pretty sticky. Okay. So now here's what we're going to do. So you know how I had this extra cup of flour that my recipe said I might need about 3/4 to up to 4 cups. So I have 3 cups already combined. See how sticky this is? It's sticking to my hand. I'm going to add in another 1/4 cup of flour. So with yeast, you don't want to put yeast bread. You don't want to put too much flour into your dough because it's going to make it dry and crumbly. And we want it to be light and airy, but we don't want our dough to be too sticky. Okay. So I did 3 cups and a 1/4 cup, and that's pretty good. So I still have some flour and dough residue left in my bowl, and I'm going to now knead. Okay. So you knead by putting your flour down. Now, if it was really sticky, you could add a little bit of your extra flour mixture. I'm not going to because this is not sticky anymore, and I don't want to add too much flour. Okay, so you take your dough, okay? And even if it's still sticky right now, what we're going to do kneading is going to strengthen our gluten. So gluten is a cellular object that is in the flour, and when you add water to flour, you form gluten. Okay, so the gluten is what strengthens anything with flour. Okay, so to make it activate, make it come alive better with that yeast, you need to knead. So you take your dough, we kind of flattened it off, and you're going to take the top, and then I'm going to push with the heel of my hand. Okay, I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to push with the heel of my hand. So this is still somewhat sticky, which is fine. We can sprinkle more flour as we're going. But what we're doing now is we are kneading our dough, working our dough, and it is sticky, like I said, so I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit more. If you are going to make this and yours is somewhat sticky, then you can always add a little bit more. Okay, that's why you have to be really careful when you see a range, because it means you might not use it all. Okay. So I'm just going to keep kneading my dough, and I'm going to do this for about 8 minutes just to make sure it is completely beautiful texture. And how you know it's a beautiful texture is you're going to do what's called a spring method, where you take your fingers and it holds your indentation. If it springs back, then it's not good. So I'm probably going to do this for about a couple more minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. All right, so we are back, and we are going to do the shortcut method for making your dough rise or double in size. So this method is boiling it. So this doesn't work with every recipe, but it does work to make these pretzels very quick, so you can make the dough and essentially shape and boil them as fast as possible. Okay, so I did boil some water. I just did this in a shallow skillet. All right, and what I'm going to do, I finished shaping. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your shaped, and I brought it to a full boil. You're going to take your shaped pretzel and you're going to put it right into the water very carefully. What this is going to do is it's going to make the dough rise, thicken up, and it's going to add really good texture to these pretzels. So you're going to let these boil for about a minute or so. And you can kind of see they'll get a little bubbly, and they're going to help take on that really chewy texture that we are wanting pretzels to have. Okay. So just to, as this is cooking, just to recap where we're at, we scaled our ingredients. Which is step one. We mixed and kneaded our dough. We skipped rising and we skipped punching it down because we're doing this boiling. Then I made our portions by just cutting slices. I got about 10 portions. We shaped our portions into pretzels. And now typically we would be baking, but we're going to boil and then we're going to bake. Okay. So these are pretty much good to go. So I'm just using a slotted turner. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to drain off that water, and you're going to set them right on to your baking sheet. So you can kind of see they kind of rose a little bit. Okay, now they will continue rising in the oven. They will not expand necessarily like on the baking sheet. They will just rise up. That's typically what yeast bread does. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my water. I'm going to move us over here. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I had my other pretzels I boiled, put off to the side. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that egg we mixed up. We're going to take a pastry brush. You can use your finger, and we're going to apply our egg wash. So the egg wash is going to help give a golden brown color, and it's also going to serve as a glue for our salt. Okay. Now these are just salted pretzels. If you wanted to put garlic salt on them instead, you could, or like what Auntie Anne's does is what they do is they melt butter and they dip the pretzels in butter when they come out, and then they dip them in cinnamon and sugar, or they dip them in like a garlic salt or cheese powder, whatever it is. Okay. So that has my garlic or my egg wash on it. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sprinkle it with just a little bit of salt, just for my salt taste. Okay. Now I don't have large salt, so I just use iodized, which is just regular salt. Okay. So now we're going to let these bake in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes, and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. We'll be right back. All right, so we are back with the pretzels, and they are done. So you can see that they have that nice golden brown color. They do stick to the aluminum, so make sure you always put something down, but they're nice and light brown on the other side. They're crispy on the outside and nice and soft in the center, and this is a perfect color. So at this point now, if you wanted to do a different flavoring, you can just douse it with some butter, toss it in cinnamon and sugar. You can make garlic butter and put it on there and dip it in marinara. So that possibilities are endless. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you soon.